those 8 days following Easter, as if it were Easter Sunday. And so he died on the day when the church celebrates the victory of Jesus over death through his own resurrection. And yes, there's a lot of sadness in the church right now. I expect also a lot of sadness in the world. And yet for us as a Christian people, it really is tempered with a hope, and dare I say even a joy, because Francis, who gave his life in service of the risen Lord, now we pray meets him face to face and is embraced with the Lord's mercy. So a day of sadness, but also a day of hope for Christian people, for Pope Francis.
Hi, Sean with City News.
Hi.
What was it like for you personally to be with the Pope at Mesquachi, at Lacsinen?
You know, and I would also add, if I may, also the delegation went to Rome. I was part of that too. There, I would say, and this is a strong, strong lesson for our society right now, Pope Francis taught me what it means to listen. He sat for a few days with the delegation of Indigenous peoples in his office, and he just listened. Just listened to them as they poured out their hearts, the stories, and the sad histories that they were experiencing, either themselves or of their people. And it really, really impacted his heart. And what that taught me was the importance of listening in order to hear. And I remember the Indigenous people saying, he really heard us. And you know as well as I do that we've kind of lost that ability to listen. We kind of listen in order to react or reject or to cancel or to talk over one another's sentences. That's not listening, and that's only serving, I think, to deepen the fracture of our society right now. The way that we actually make that determination to listen to one another is I think, that's what impacted me the most, together with his determination. When he was here in Edmonton, I can tell you, I was with him hours through every day, and he was in constant pain. He wasn't going to let that be known, but he wouldn't let that stop him. So determined was he to bring healing and to touch and to be not just the impact, but the impacted by the Indigenous peoples. And so just to see that strong commitment on his part, conviction, determination to reach out to those in need, that did touch me pretty deeply, I'd have to say.
What's the latest in continuing to reconcile with Indigenous people? I understand from that time it was said that this is not just a one-time thing. This is an ongoing effort.
Yeah.
So what is the latest locally in that?
There's a few things. So locally we had established, as did the church across the country, as one example, we established an Indigenous Reconciliation Fund, and that was Indigenous-led, Indigenous discerned. And that's been used here locally to fund about 35 different projects, I think, aimed at reconciliation, healing, cultural preservation, and these sorts of things. And I continue personally to meet with the Indigenous leaders. So just recently, I met with a number of the chiefs out at the Enoch area. We compared notes and how we're going to work forward together. I'm going down this week to meet the people with Mesquachis. Reconciliation really happens one relationship at a time. And that's certainly the modus operandi that I have developed and continue to work according to. And is the more that we can do, I personally, others in the church personally, to establish those deep relationships of mutual respect and understanding, readiness to learn from the other, I think the more reconciliation will go forward. And I think it'll go forward also as a beacon to our society as to how we reconcile.
Can you, sorry if I get vague with the Canadian press, can you talk a little bit about your visit to Mesquachis? Like, what are you going to be doing there, and what kind of conversations are you hoping to have
this week?
with the folks there? Yeah.
Well, it's actually going to be taking some different shape now in the light of the death of the Pope. This has been on the books, as it were, for a little while now. And the point was to sit down with them, is to kind of reminisce, to talk, strengthen those relationships. But now we reached out to them this morning, and they'd like to have Mass with me there when I go down on Wednesday, meet with the folks. And it's going to bring back a lot of memories. That's the first place that the Pope visited. And I hope people recognize the significance of that, because normally when a pope goes to a country, he meets first with the head of state, he meets with the diplomats, he has all these receptions, then does the other stuff. Not this time. He went first directly to the Indigenous peoples. His first words were that famous heartfelt apology, and he signaled right then and there at Mesquachis, and then subsequently to that that the Indigenous peoples were his priority. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of beautiful reminiscences there on Wednesday night when we meet, and the conversations will still continue into the future as to how we walk together.
Morgan with Global News. Hello.
Hi.
What sense did you get from those who came today? Do you think this was, a special trip they made to church because of the death of Pope Francis? Do you think this was, Easter Mass they came?
A bit of both. Normally a weekday Mass, this is a Monday, it's a work day now, right? People work, would have a smaller crowd than we saw today. So some would have been here because it's Easter Monday, but others came because they heard the news this morning. So there was certainly a scrambling. I think wanting to get here and to be here and to pray. At a certain point, as we follow what's happening out of the Vatican, we'll want to be working in sync with that. I think we'll have to have, because many will want it, we'll have to have a more deliberate celebration here, inviting the whole Archdiocese, giving them time to come so that we can celebrate together that legacy, pray for the Holy Father. But it's not just here. I was noticing on the news, as I'm sure you folks did this morning, just this instant global coverage of this historical moment. So it's a sign, it seems to me, that the Pope throughout his, 12, 13 years as Pope here, really had an extraordinary impact, not just on the Church, but also on the world, and the outpouring of grief, of prayer, of desire to be together really signals that to me.
Evan, CTV News. You mentioned what you took away from the Pope coming and visiting here. What do you hope or think the people of Edmonton or First Nations people can take away from that visit?
Oh, I hope they remember how much they were loved by the Pope. For them, the Pope, in his eyes, they mattered. They mattered. Anybody who's marginalized, who's hurting, matters to the Pope. He held them in his heart, and I hope people realize how precious really they were to the Pope, but also, by extension, how precious they were in the eyes of Almighty God. I don't know how much time we have for this, but just as a little anecdote, I was in Rome when he was elected, when he did the first Mass, and you may recall that after he was elected, he went back to the place where he had stayed in the hotel to pay his bill. Right, that was the big story, and everybody was saying, "Isn't this remarkable? A Pope would go back to pay his bill." That was only secondary. I was there. The reason he went back was to thank the staff. He knew them. He had worked with them through the years, and I remember saying to the staff, the people that often aren't even acknowledged in society, the maintenance, the kitchen staff, and so on. I said, "This was the first papal visit," and they said, "Yep." And it was to us. And I said, there's a signal right then and there that this is a man, this is a Pope for, if I put it this way, the little guy or the forgotten or the needy. And that just played itself out in so many ways throughout his whole papacy. And in a particularly remarkable way, to your question, among the Indigenous peoples. I've talked to a lot of them since, and they really felt that they were heard by him. They really felt loved by him. And anytime I've talked to the Indigenous peoples after that about the impact of the visit, it's not very long before some tears start to flow, when they talk about healing either personally within themselves or among other people that they know, members of their family. So impact was extraordinary, and it may take a long time yet for all of that to come out and for us to realize just how deeply he has impacted not just this local area, but also the world.
What's next for the Church? Could you be the Pope?
Could I be the Pope? No.
How does that work?
Not a chance. No. Well, we're going to follow this over the next little while, but as I understand it, the Pope's body will be placed in a coffin later today, transferred to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday for veneration by the peoples, by the cardinals, the bishops present in Rome. Cardinals will now start to assemble in Rome. At a certain point, it will be announced when they'll start to have what they call congregations or meetings to talk about priorities of the Church and so on, get to know one another. And then, whenever the moment is right, they'll enter into conclave and enter the process of electing the next Pope. And so we'll all be, like the world, following this and waiting with bated breath to see what happens.
Any idea when that would happen?
No, we'll just have to wait. As I understand it, there's 9 days of official mourning, which may actually extend beyond the actual funeral of the Pope. I don't know yet when that will be. We have to wait for it to be announced. And after that period of mourning, then there's another period of the congregations, the meetings, then into the conclave. So unfolding, I'm guessing, like everybody else, over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Your Grace.
You are welcome.
What did the Pope mean to you personally?
Personally, you know, I've had the extraordinary privilege of meeting Pope Francis a number of times. A few times in his office, talking with him personally. Certainly a few times in gatherings at the Vatican and meetings, and then spending those extraordinary days here in Canada at his side all the time and having meals with him and listening to him. So first of all, I feel extraordinarily blessed that I had that proximity to the man. But also I'm thinking of that lesson, and I think I mentioned it earlier, that lesson of a heart that has to be not just open to the needy, but a heart that's ready to be broken because of the plight of the needy. And Pope Francis, I saw it personally, we all saw it. He wore his heart on his sleeve. And you could just tell that his heart bled for anybody that was suffering or in need, and he didn't hesitate to make his voice known on their behalf, to advocate for them. So to have had that moment at this particular juncture of history, to meet him and to sit down with him and listen to him and learn from him has just been, I'd have to say, just a wonderful blessing.
Is there anything you're looking for in a new Pope?
You know what I'd be looking for in a new Pope is a surprise. What I mean is every Pope is a surprise. So often we'll probably see this over the next little while, going into conclave and all kinds of speculation about who the next Pope could be and so on. I guess that's just natural. But it's usually a surprise. And in this case, I don't know if you've been able to follow, but the Pope, in his choice of cardinals, broke the mold. And he went all over the world, countries that never had popes before. Again, that probably an extension of that reaching out to the periphery. Right? And so we have a college of cardinals now where a lot of them don't know one another. They're going to come from their own different perspectives, shaped by their own culture and so on. And so it really does add to that sense of wonderment as to who this could be. All of that is behind the sense of it's going to be a surprise.
But with all the progress that Pope Francis made, I hate that we use the word pressure, but on this next person coming in, is it time for the church to rest, or is it time for the church to keep pushing forward because of the progress that has been made? There might be a sense that it's time to, okay, we've done enough for now.
We'll see, right? Time will tell. And what I mean is every Pope is unique. Every Pope is unique. And so I don't think it's really correct to think we're just going to have an automatic continuation. There's always a fundamental continuity in the church, in her teaching and so on and so forth. The Pope was extraordinarily pastoral, right? And that really came out in all that he did. And so I do think there's going to be an abiding hope of a continuing outreach to any who feel on the edge, the periphery, the needy, and so on. How that will take exact shape right now is anybody's guess. It will all depend upon the personality and the particularities of the next Pope.
Your Grace, a couple of questions over the live stream from Willow Fiddler from the Globe and Mail. How will the outstanding work of the TRC and the Church continue after Pope Francis's death? Well,
that's on us. It's a great question. But what the Pope himself made very, very clear in his message to the bishops when he was here in Canada, yes, it's now on you, bishops. I mean, you're the local shepherds here. You must continue to walk with the Indigenous peoples, to listen to their stories, and take every opportunity to reconcile. The Pope did leave us a beautiful body of teaching in all the different talks that he gave. They were extraordinary, from Mascoutchis to Sacred Heart to Lac Saint Anne to Quebec to Iqaluit. All of his words really gave us a lot of food for thought, some clear direction. But that's on us now. And so the bishops are taking that seriously, obviously, and looking for every way that we can in our local environments to move that forward. And I talked about some of that here earlier.
And a question from Jacqueline Carmichael from the Edmonton Journal. Pope Francis paid particular attention to the impact of colonization and the church's role in residential schools. What kind of real impact did his voice have on that legacy, and what remains to be done to fulfill his mission?
You know, I would say, first of all, that he really raised it to everybody's consciousness. I remember following the Pope's visit, I had a lot of people, non-Indigenous, that were coming up to me, and I would hear it from across the country. This was new to us. This is really, as amazing as that is to hear, this is the first we're really hearing about the legacy of the residential schools. So he really brought it to everybody's attention, not only in Canada, but also internationally, and gave us all food for thought on that. But how we carry that forward, I really do believe unfolds locally. Yes, we've made national commitments on all of this, but if reconciliation is one relationship at a time, that can only unfold on a local level. And I've certainly made efforts to do that, and I know that many of the bishops across the country will too.
And a follow-up question, how did having a pope from the Americas impact Catholics in Canada?
I remember having that same kind of question actually at the outset of his papacy, when I was in Rome meeting with some of the media there too. And what really struck me is that he came out of Latin America as a pope of the poor. He was famous in Buenos Aires for going out into the favelas all around the city to be with the poor, to get to know them and to walk with them, and to become a voice for them. And he did become that voice internationally for the poor and the needy everywhere. So that becomes, it seems to me, an invitation to the people of Canada, as with any other country, to pay close attention to the needs of those around us. There's an abiding temptation, it seems to me, in our society today to be a little self-centered, thinking only of ourselves first, all the while there being a suffering humanity all around us, sometimes very near to us. So that would be, I think, a profound legacy of the Pope. Keep your eyes wide open to the needs of the people around you and look for ways to reconcile and to heal.
Further questions?
Thank you.
You are welcome. My thanks to you for coming out, really. And I hope the rest of your day is good.
In French.
I'll do my best.
Over here for that one.